Hey everybody, welcome to Drive Thru Review 329. Today we're going to talk about Harbour. This is a new game from Tasty Minstrel Games, and it plays 1 to 4 players. Haven't played it solitaire, but it is a sort of Le Havre style game in some ways and in other ways not. Let's just jump into how it works, and I will tell you why it's amazing. So Harbour is very much a Euro-style worker placement game about shipping goods in and out of the harbor, trying to make money on the current market. But it's also set in a fantasy setting. As you can see here, there's goblins and dwarves and other kinds of things. First thing players are going to be doing is selecting their player board. And as you can see here, there's a ton of options to choose from. Normally players are dealt 2 of these and then they choose one to go with. But on the back side of each of these is a kind of beginner or generic side, and all of these have the same special abilities. Each player will also take a worker in their chosen color and one of each of the 4 resource markers. Now in the center of the board there'll be a little market board, and you'll randomly put one of each of the resource markers into the $2, $3, $4, and $5 spaces on this board. And the game comes with a deck of 36 building cards, and you're going to deal out 3 plus the number of players face up onto the table. So in this case we're set up for a 3-player game. Now the object of the game is to actually purchase these cards, but at the start of the game they're going to be available in the center of the table for players to place their workers on and activate them for their special abilities. And before we get started, players will also decide to allocate 3 resources however they want. So in this case, for argument's sake, let's say I just wanted to start with 2 fish and 1 brick. Let's take a look at one of the cards here. So this example here is the woodworker's hut, and you can see when you place your worker here, you'll reduce your wood by 1, but then gain 1 of everything else. At the top of the card you can see the cost to actually buy the building, and then the points on the left-hand side that the building will be worth at the end of the game. Each player also comes with a starter building on their player card, as well as a special ability that will be individual to them. Now you probably should start with the basic side of the cards. It take a play or 2 probably to get your head around how that market works and what the implications are for that. But once you get the hang of it, then definitely play with the different player abilities, because man, that makes the game awesome, just amazing. But before we get to the review, let's jump into a little bit of how a turn's going to work. So the game will end once one player has built 4 buildings, and then each other player will get a turn, and then you're going to add up the points on the buildings to see who has the most points and is the winner. I should say the game also comes with some bonus cards that will give you extra points for a particular type of good. These are actually dealt hidden to each player, and then you can convert 1 resource to points at the end of the game. This is optional, but I would recommend it after you've played the game a couple times. So always what you're going to be doing is moving your worker from whatever building they're currently on to another building. And then you'll be activating that building's special action, and that's it. And then the next player will move their worker to another building and take their action, and we'll just keep going around and around and around. Now you might be asking, how do I actually build these buildings? Well, everybody's going to have the ability to build a building on their starter sheet. And some buildings may come out onto the center display that also allowed you to build buildings. For example, this one actually lets you gain a stone and then build a building. So how do you actually build a building? Well, if you take a look here, you can see how many of the different goods we have. We've got 1 stone, 3 cattle, 4 wood, and 4 fish. So if we take a look at the marketplace board, you can see what that's going to get us. Now let's look at the marketplace board. What is this telling us? Well, this is telling us the minimum amount we need for each of these goods and the dollar amount that that will provide. So for example, we have 4 fish and 4 wood. Now that works out good for the fish because we have the minimum amount, and that means we're going to get $4. We only have 4 wood, but you need 5 wood, or else you can't ship the wood. But once you do have 5 wood, then you're actually going to get $5 from shipping it and then applying that to building the building. So in this case, what can we do? Well, let's say we wanted to buy that woodworker's hut we saw earlier. If we go back to our board, you can see we've got 4 fish and 3 cattle. So that's enough. We have 4 fish. We can activate the fish, activate the cattle, which we've got 3 of, and that's going to give us $7. We're going to ship all of the cattle and fish off of our board, reducing them to 0. And then because we activated the fish and cattle goods, we're going to reset the demand for those. So those have been activated and moved down. We're going to slide everything else up and then follow the pathway around and reset those. So now the thing that was worth the most, the fish, is now worth the least. This market mechanism is awesome. And the way that it works is very, very interesting. It's going to take, I think, a play or 2 to get everybody's head around it. because you can really get cut off at the knees, first of all, because, okay, you see, hey, the wood and the fish, those are at the high end, so I need a lot of that, because you need exactly 5 or more wood and 4 more fish in this case. So you're like, okay, I'm going to build up, I'm going to take some actions on some different things. This one gives me fish, this one gives me wood, I'm going to build up. But then somebody goes ahead and builds before you do, so now they've reset the value of the fish and the wood all the way down to 2 and 3. So when you activate them, you're only going to get the amount worth on the market. So if I had 5 wood but was only worth 2, when I activate that, I don't just move the wood down twice, I have to spend all of it. So if I have more than 2 wood, it's a waste. So it's a very simple mechanism for showing supply and demand and, you know, futures markets and whatever you want to do. We've really been getting into this. But it's very interesting. So you have to almost be ahead of the game, because you say, okay, Billy over there, he's already got a lot of wood and fish. I'm going to be out of that game. He's going to build that before I can. So I'm going to do the cattle and the stone, because I know those are, demand's going to go up for those. So now I'm all primed and ready to go. But if you're playing with 3 or 4 players, you know, you've got to be really wary. So let's take a look at some of the special abilities on the buildings. This will give us some sense of the manipulation that you can do in this game. So this spot, for example, you're going to gain 1 of each type of good, but then each opponent gains 1 good of their choice. This next one's very interesting. This one allows you to gain a wood, but then you get to swap 2 markers on the marketplace board. Next we've got here, this is the library. This actually lets you buy 2 buildings at once. So you got to watch out when this comes out, because somebody could buy 2 very quickly. That puts them at 4 buildings, and then now they've triggered the end of the game more suddenly than you expected. And here's the bank, and this one actually lets you shift 1 market to the lowest, bump everything up, and then buy a building. Here's the blacksmith. This will let you reduce 1 good by 3, but then increase 2 others by 2 apiece. Finally, the last thing to notice on these buildings are these little icons here on the right hand side. These only come into play when you've purchased a building and it's in front of you. So moving from left to right, first we have the little coin symbol. This allows all buildings to be $1 less when you purchase them. So if a building shows $9, you can purchase it for $8. The next symbol is the warehouse symbol. This allows you to keep 1 good per warehouse when you ship, because remember, you have to get rid of all the goods no matter what the goods are worth. So this allows you to kind of get restarted in the whole good collection game for your next purchase. Next we see the anchor, and there's a lot of abilities that will trigger off the anchor. It may say like collect 1 fish for each anchor you have, or do XYZ for each anchor you have. So depending on how the anchors are kind of dealt out in the game, these may be worth more or less depending. And finally you have the top hat. So the top hat allows you to use other people's buildings for free. Normally if you go to visit either their player card or a building that they've already purchased, then you have to pay them a good. So you've got to give them a cattle or something. Now if you have a building with a top hat, you no longer have that obligation. So that's pretty much how you play the game. And this game is really, really awesome, really, really fun. It's really cool because it's very cutthroat in a lot of ways, because you've got cards that allow you to manipulate the market. You can see somebody's really setting up to build like a big point building, because all like the 10, 11 point buildings are all worth about 10, 11 bucks. And you know, the lesser point buildings are worth less and so on. Now that's not 100% true across the board, because some of them are valued on their special abilities. Because if I grab a nice building and you know it's a little cheaper, not worth as many points, but people are using it on my side, then I'm going to collect goods from that, unless of course they have the top hats. So it's very tricky to explain why this is so good, because it feels very much like any old Euro. You've got 1 worker, just like kind of Le Havre. You place it on a building, you do the action, now you got to move it, and you know, it's got the little supply and demand manipulation thing, but it is a blast. We've been having just an awesome time playing it. The special abilities are cool, and I really do like playing with the special bonus cards at the end, because it allows you to sort of not get so cut off at the knees, because if you're not set up to buy a building on your last turn, once somebody else has triggered the end of the game, you're like, okay, well I can do nothing on my last turn. That's not really a problem with the game at all. It's just like, you got to be ready for that sucker. So that's not always the case, and so it's nice to have that sort of little thing to fall back on, get a couple extra points. It kind of softens it up a little bit, and I like it because it kind of also lets you focus earlier in the game on setting yourself up to get a lot of points. And so it's a real kind of interesting decision between, okay, well, I'm going to get a lot of points for this if I hold on to it, but now it's worth a lot in the market because everybody else has been kind of letting it sleep, and now it's kind of gradually moved up to the top of the market. So do I spend it and then get more points from the building? So it is very, very interesting. It's cool because of all the special abilities. So you've got all the different special buildings. So the way those get dealt out, that initial deal very much is going to set the tone for the game. If you get a lot of market manipulation stuff that happens, that's going to be a very different game than if you don't see any of those or only see one kind of towards the end of the game. So that's very interesting to come back and play it in that way, where that first deal of buildings is going to be very different. But then you start playing with the special abilities of the player boards, and that's awesome. That's like, oh, I got to consider this now. So the value of things is going to change, relatively drastically based on the special abilities that are out and the special abilities of the building. So you kind of combine all this, and so everybody's kind of assessment of what's a strong building is very interesting. I mean, there's some that are like, you go to this building and you pay one good of your choice. So you pay a cattle. And then on your next turn, you can do another building twice. Or another one will let you, it's sort of a temporary building that when you go on it disappears, nobody can buy it, but it allows you to break some rules. So there's some cool little combo-y kind of things like that. So then when you add, again, the player abilities and all that cool stuff, it really changes the game. So, I'm just like, it's like, what? This is crazy. This is like a filler, but it's not. It's like super meaty and chunky. And I don't know, I got to say one thing. It's just hyperbolic, but I mean, seriously, where did Scott Almes come from? He just did Tiny Epic Kingdoms, which we had a blast playing. I know he did Kings of Air Steam and Mars Dice and all that stuff, Martian Dice. But these last two games are just like, what? This is great. And so, I don't know, I know he's got these other tiny epic games coming out, but this one just blew me out of the water. I was like, what? This is good. I mean, this is really, really good. I mean, it's not just a filler, it's like a really good Euro. And the way the special abilities work, I mean, we were talking about it today, and it was like, and I'm kind of just going off the rails here, but whatever. We're like, okay, is this balanced, is it not balanced? Because some special abilities on the characters seem like they're way better than the others. But you can kind of tell, everybody, there's one special ability, it was like anytime somebody uses their own building, I had this yesterday, then I get a good. So everybody usually has this kind of little safe building that they can use on their own player board, but then nobody wanted to use it because every time they did it, I got a good. And I was like, this is great, I'm taking it. But everybody's like, no, we're not going to let you make use of that. It totally changed the game too, the way people were placing. So I don't think it's balanced. I think it's out of whack, but it's cool because it's like you redeal it and you shuffle it up, and whoever figures out the right sort of pathway through the balance or the lack of balance is going to be the succeeder, but they're going to be the winner. So I think it's really cool how that works out. And it's basically like Le Havre, but like the whole resource where, in Le Havre, you build up all the fish and you take all the fish, that's gone. Now it's just all buildings that you're placing on. So, it's really cool. I would definitely recommend it. I don't know what the price point is on this, to be honest. I should know that, but I assume it's not that expensive. So, totally get this. Everybody should get this. I think everybody will like this. Seems like a game that everybody would really like. Unless you don't like getting, your butt beat. Because that can happen. We've had close games. We've had games where somebody just dominated. But it's just because they played better. And that's, totally, it's not like they got a better building or anything, because everything's out there. I can use your building and maybe your special ability is better, but it's just, it's really good. So anyway, thanks.